Power has never lacked voices that agree with it. What it has always lacked is truth, because truth is inconvenient. Truth disrupts comfort. Truth threatens positions, profits, and pride. And that's why most people stay silent, not because they don't know what's right, but because they're afraid of what it might cost. History doesn't remember those who protected their seats. It remembers those who protected their values. Speaking truth to power is not about shouting louder. It's not about anger, rebellion, or ego. It's about moral clarity in moments of pressure. It's about choosing courage over compliance, integrity over approval, responsibility over comfort. Every system that failed first silenced truth. Every culture that collapsed did so slowly, not from lack of intelligence, but from lack of bravery. The question isn't whether you see the problem. The question is whether you'll say something when it's risky, when it's lonely, when it actually matters. Because power never changes from criticism shouted outside the room. Power changes when truth is spoken inside it. So the real question is not, how do you speak truth to power? It's this, who are you willing to be when the cost is real? Silence is not passive. It is an active decision that reinforces whoever already holds control. When men stay quiet in the presence of unfair authority, the system reads that quiet as agreement, and power grows more confident because it assumes consent where there is only fear. Men are often taught that strength means endurance, not expression. From an early age, many learn that speaking up risks status, belonging, or respect. So silence becomes a survival strategy, a way to stay inside the circle even when something feels wrong. Power understands this psychology very well. It rewards loyalty, promotes obedience, and labels discomfort as weakness, knowing that many men will choose acceptance over confrontation if the cost of truth feels too personal. But from a women's perspective, that silence carries a different weight. When men with access, credibility, or authority choose not to speak, it doesn't feel neutral. It feels like abandonment, as if the burden of resistance is quietly shifted onto those with less protection. Women often see silence as a form of endorsement, not because they assume malice, but because lived experience has taught them that systems only change when those inside them challenge the rules. Silence tells them the system matters more than the people harmed by it. Men, meanwhile, frequently underestimate the influence their voice already carries. They assume speaking up must be dramatic or confrontational, when often it's a calm question, a refusal to laugh, a decision not to look away. The uncomfortable truth is that power depends on good men staying quiet more than it fears bad men speaking loudly. Silence keeps reputations intact, hierarchy stable, and accountability delayed, which is why doing nothing feels easier than doing what's right. Speaking truth disrupts that dynamic because it breaks the illusion of unanimous agreement and exposes the gap between stated values and actual behavior, a gap that power hopes no one with credibility will ever name. Courage is not something men are born with or without. It is something they rehearse every day in small, often unseen moments. Most men believe courage appears when the stakes are high, but in reality, it is built quietly through repeated choices to speak when silence would be easier. Men are conditioned to see bravery as fearlessness rather than honesty. Admitting doubt, questioning authority, or naming discomfort can feel like exposing weakness. So many men wait for confidence to arrive before they act, not realizing confidence is usually the result of action, not the requirement for it. Power benefits from this misunderstanding because it frames courage as a rare personality trait instead of a learnable behavior. When courage feels exclusive, men who see themselves as ordinary excuse their silence, assuming they are simply not the type who challenges systems. From a women's perspective, courage often looks very different. Women are accustomed to practicing it daily in smaller, less celebrated ways, navigating consequences while still choosing to speak, which makes male hesitation feel less like fear and more like privilege. Men often overlook how much permission they already have. When a man speaks truth, he is frequently given the benefit of rationality or leadership, yet many hesitate because they overestimate the personal cost and underestimate the collective impact. Courage grows through repetition, not intensity. Each time a man asks an uncomfortable question, refuses to endorse harmful behavior, or names a misalignment between values and actions, He trains himself to act again when the pressure increases. The psychology is simple but uncomfortable. Power feels permanent only when unchallenged, and courage becomes reliable only when practiced long before the moment everyone claims they would have spoken up. Truth only has power when the person hearing it believes the person speaking cares about more than being right. Men often assume that facts alone are enough to challenge authority, but without trust, truth sounds like accusation and is quickly dismissed as threat. Men are trained to value logic over relationship, believing that clarity will overcome resistance. In environments shaped by power, however, people don't resist truth because it's unclear. They resist it because they don't trust the intentions behind it. Power listens selectively, and it listens longest to voices it believes are loyal to the mission, not hostile to the person. When a man speaks truth without first earning trust, he is often labeled disruptive rather than responsible, regardless of how accurate his message is. From a woman's perspective, trust is not a soft concept, it is survival. Women learn early that speaking truth without relational safety can carry real consequences, which is why they often invest heavily in credibility, consistency, and care before challenging authority. This difference creates a misunderstanding. Men may see relationship building as unnecessary politics, while women recognize it as the groundwork that makes truth harder to ignore and easier to accept. Trust is built when actions consistently align with stated values. When men show up reliably, listen without defensiveness, and demonstrate concern for people beyond outcomes, their words begin to carry weight even when uncomfortable. Without trust, truth feels like noise because it lacks context and care. With trust, the same words feel like responsibility, signaling that the speaker is not trying to win an argument, but protect the integrity of the system and the people inside it. The moment speaking truth becomes about winning, power stops listening and starts defending itself. Many men approach confrontation as a contest, believing that if their argument is strong enough, authority will surrender, not realizing that power rarely changes its mind when it feels attacked. Men are often taught to equate success with dominance. In debates, meetings, and institutions, the instinct is to prove intelligence, expose flaws, and come out on top, even though this mindset quietly reinforces the very hierarchies being challenged. Power is not persuaded by defeat, it is destabilized by awareness. When truth is framed as an invitation to see R, rather than a demand to concede, it bypasses ego and reaches conscience, which is where real change begins. From a women's perspective, waking up the room has always been the objective. Women know that forcing a win can trigger retaliation, dismissal, or isolation, so they often focus on planting clarity instead of chasing victory. This difference can frustrate men who may interpret restraint as weakness. Yet restraint is often strategic, recognizing that once awareness spreads, power loses its ability to pretend nothing is wrong. Men frequently underestimate the ripple effect of a single honest moment. A question asked publicly, a story shared calmly, or a refusal to play along can shift the emotional temperature of an entire room without raising voices or drawing lines. The real measure of courage is not whether authority loses face, but whether others leave the room thinking differently than they did before, questioning assumptions that once felt untouchable and noticing truths they were trained not to see. Power pays attention when it encounters someone who cannot be easily dismissed or redefined. When a man's values are clear and his behavior aligns with them over time, authority struggles to label him as emotional, disloyal, or opportunistic because consistency removes those convenient excuses. Men often believe that speaking truth is about timing or phrasing, when it is more often about credibility. If values shift depending on who is in the room, power senses uncertainty and waits it out. Knowing inconsistency weakens any challenge before it begins. Consistency feels risky to many men because it requires choosing principles over approval. Upholding the same values in private conversations as in public forums can threaten access, promotions, or influence, which is why many quietly compromise and tell themselves they'll speak up later. From a women's perspective, inconsistency is not a minor flaw. It is a warning sign. Women are accustomed to watching whether words match actions, because history has taught them that promises without patterns offer little protection. This difference shapes how truth is received. When men speak up only when it's safe or popular, their courage feels conditional. But when they show up the same way, regardless of pressure, their voice gains moral weight that power cannot ignore. Power listens when it knows resistance will not fade with convenience. A man who calmly repeats the same concern, holds the same line, and refuses to be distracted by status or flattery forces authority to confront the issue rather than the individual. Values become visible through repetition. Each decision to act in alignment, each refusal to excuse harm, and each willingness to accept discomfort reinforces a reputation that outlives any single moment of dissent. Consistency also creates trust across genders. Women recognize reliability as allyship, not performance, while men begin to understand that strength is not adaptability to power, but loyalty to what they claim to stand for. When values are clear, truth becomes predictable, and predictable truth is difficult for power to manage because it cannot be silenced, negotiated away, or reframed without exposing its own contradictions. Change never begins with permission. It begins with someone deciding that waiting for safety is no longer acceptable. Most men delay speaking truth because they are scanning for guarantees, job security, social approval, or reassurance that they won't stand alone, yet real change has never waited for those conditions. Men are taught to manage risk, not challenge it. Speaking before it's safe feels reckless because it threatens identity, reputation, and belonging. So silence is framed as patience and fear is disguised as strategy. Power relies on this hesitation. As long as men wait for the right moment, the system continues uninterrupted, knowing that safety usually appears only after someone else has already taken the first risk. From a woman's perspective, the expectation of safety sounds unrealistic. Women often speak knowing there will be consequences because their experience has taught them that protection rarely arrives before action and is often created by it. This gap in experience creates tension. Men may believe they are being responsible by waiting, while women see delay as complicity, a reminder that those with more protection often hesitate the longest. Speaking early does not mean being loud or careless. It means naming misalignment when it first appears, questioning direction before damage is normalized, and choosing clarity before silence hardens into policy. Men frequently underestimate how much earlier intervention matters. A concern raised at the beginning feels uncomfortable but manageable. The same concern raised later feels disruptive because it threatens invested time, money, and ego. Power resists late challenges by calling them untimely, but early truth removes that defense. When someone speaks before it's safe, they expose the issue while it is still small enough to address without humiliation or loss of face. Women recognize this pattern intuitively. They understand that early discomfort prevents deeper harm, which is why delayed courage often feels less like wisdom and more like avoidance. The psychology underneath is simple. Safety is not the condition for speaking truth. It is often the result of someone creating it through risk, consistency, and moral clarity, especially when others are still calculating what it might cost.